Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey everyone, welcome to the discussion for Forest of Radgost, which was a game that I had backed mainly for like the Slavic lore. That was kind of the main draw for me, and the fact that it was like, you know, choice-based and story-based and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, okay, cool, a game about Slavic lore where you're immersed in the lore. It sounds like it's right up my alley. It's not. The Slavic lore part of this game is definitely its strength.
Yeah.
It is based off what they had said, like around 4 years of research and making sure that they had everything correct. And I think that is easily the best part of the game, in my opinion.
Yeah.
With the Book of Encounters, like the art that they depict in the Book of Encounters, I think is super cool.
Explaining the creatures, the history.
And even in just for sheer game purposes, they talk about like for example, when they talk about the crossroads. So just the regular spots, it says, like, in this game, the place where creature tokens and figures will be placed, but then it also tells you stuff like in Slavic tales and mythology. So, like, crossroads are magical and mystical places where you can encounter creatures and unholy forces. So even just for their appendix of explaining, hey, in the game, here's what it is mechanically, but here's what it is in lore.
Right.
So that is easily the best part of the game, and that's the only reason I would ever want to actually play this.
Or you could just read the book and look at the art.
Yes, I can, and that's kind of really it. After multiple playthroughs of this, it's kind of like even coming across the same creature, like, it's like, okay.
Let me read a different section this time about that creature.
Yeah, because obviously it's not fun for a lot of people to sit here and be read at.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, here's what the creature is, and here's 4 different sections about it. Oh, what do you want to know about between these 4? And then, because it's like, I'm not reading all of it. Unfortunately, at least for me, pretty much everything else about this game kind of falls flat. I don't think this game is bad. I think it's for a very, very specific group.
Who?
Family with kids.
Okay.
And the reason why I also say that is because they specifically mention in their rulebook, let me see if I can find it, Forest of Radgost Guide for Parents. What reviewers said, the narrative content, Dimitri's choice, talking points, and game mechanics.
Okay.
So
it's designed to be an educational game.
I think so.
Not an interesting one.
Our youngest test player was a 7-year-old girl. Most of the other children were 9 to 12. Those children were mostly for non-gaming or light gaming families.
Gotcha.
So, and I will actually give them huge props for including that in the rulebook, because most people don't even talk about who their game is for.
Right.
So
because they hope it's for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And most of the time it's not. So then, if they hadn't had that in here, and I hadn't already had preconceived notions coming into the run through and review, I'd be tearing this game to shreds.
Yeah. Yeah.
But because I'm like, okay, this is clearly for families. It even the opening, again, it's all in the rulebook. The opening page, literally, it's like, okay, there's the title. Then, our golden rule. Though the rules here and on cards have been written to explain everything that happens, there will likely be a few times where you question how one rule will interact with another. It's best to come to an agreement as a group.
Right.
So, they didn't bog you down with, okay, are the fields, can only one person be in a field? You know what happens if this? It's just like, just let the group decide.
Right.
Overall, what did you think?
Overall, pretty much the same. I mean, beautiful design and art and quality, and the packaging looks like it's pretty amazing. Lots of depth.
Yeah.
Very literary. Does not translate into interesting play or replayability.
Right.
So, yeah, this seems like the sort of thing that would be, let's have some fun educational time with the kids.
Over a lore that is never touched on.
Right.
Which is Slavic lore.
Which is good and bad.
Yeah.
Of course, in our part of the country, the Midwest, not a lot of Slavic lore going on around here.
Which is very surprising. You'd think there would be.
But in Europe, it might be much more popular.
True.
And, of course, in Western Asia, could be fantastic. Just to be able to touch on something for us.
Yeah.
Something that we understand. That's the problem with something that is so highly thematic, is that there are parts of it that we cannot appreciate just because we're not very familiar with the theme.
And I will say the writing for it is inconsistent. There's sometimes where the writing is really good, but then other times it's like, oh, you're talking to me. Like you're trying to make it seem like they're writing to the reader, but not always. And then like, and there's multiple instances where it keeps saying the name of the creature over and over to try and hammer it home. Like
but with no pronunciation key.
They actually do have a QR code you can go to figure out how to pronounce it. I haven't done that. I just am attempting, and I'm probably butchering every single word. But it's like the Azdaja. Whenever you come across the Azdaja or the Zamaj, a Zamaj in this village is just like the Zamaj in another village, and that Zamaj is then the Zamaj. And hey, have you figured out what it is yet? Do you get it?
Yeah.
And
which that kind of repetition in a context is again good for educating young people.
Yes, and so I think you could play this game quite a few times and actually retain the information and just be like, oh, I know a little bit about Slavic lore. Like even whenever I showed you a picture of the Taliesin, like without having to reread it, I was able to tell you, oh, it's like some spirit that lives in a house, and that was just after encountering it the one time the other day.
Yep.
And so I think they did do a good job, but there are times where the reading is like, it's like I can't say this thing again. It's what's that type of writing called where you have to always reinstate the like the noun or the pronouns.
I know what you're talking about. I don't know what
I'm totally
term
right.
for it is.
Yeah. So yeah, in that type of context, it's just like I just don't want to say these names anymore.
Yeah. But the gameplay, it feels like a slightly more advanced but no more strategic version of Candyland.
See, I was thinking it's like it's a worse Tales of Arabian Nights.
I can see that too.
Especially with the fact that you choose how to interact with something
before you know what it is.
Yeah. Because in Tales of Arabian Nights, it's like, oh, you come across an angry djinn. That's Matrix C. What? How do you want to interact with it?
Do you want to talk to it? Do you want to try to trade with it? Do you want to set it on fire?
Do you want to enter it? Oh, sure. Let's see what that does, and then you have the outcome. That is probably my biggest complaint with this game, is the fact of like for them to make a game around it. They're like, oh, okay, you get to choose to. It's an interactive storytelling game. You get to choose how you do with it, or how you interact with it. Well, yeah, but you might as well flip a coin, like. Because, and I actually, very rarely do I ever do this, but I actually watched a review over this game before I had played it.
Okay.
And usually I wait till after, just to see how other people aligned with my own thoughts. I don't like to go in and be like, oh, I heard these other reviewers say all this, so now I'm kind of thinking that. Yeah. But he had said that pretty much 9 times out of 10, you're going to pick with your best. You have 4 options, but your best one is running in this case, so you're always going to pick running. And then they try and lock you out of that, so it's like, well, you can't do it, you can't run again, so now you got to pick something else. And I actually find that just really stupid. Like, I really wish that the hidden and open stuff just didn't exist.
Right.
Because it's like the game's already random.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, well, I would like to know what I'm coming across. Like, I don't have this matrix of what their skills are. Like, because then this just becomes obsolete whenever it's like, oh, number 11? Okay, well, that's a Taliesin. I can run from it because it's a 4. Okay, I guess I'll do that just because I need to get it out of my way.
Yep.
So you should be excited to interact with something, so you could be like, oh, well, last time I did a Taliesin, I ran, but this time I want to fight it and see what happens. But, I mean, in that instance, the 11 is always face up. But it'd be nice to flip over and be like, oh, that's an 8. Oh, that number 8 was the little dwarf guy. Oh, okay, well, last time we communicate with it. Let's try and hide from it this time. But because you never know what you're coming up against, you don't know what to pick, therefore you might just have a really shitty encounter.
Yeah.
And I don't like that.
Yeah. And for me, my biggest issue, at least on the simple level, is again, the randomness, the lack of control, even in movement. There are literally two things that you can do. You move, and you decide how to interact.
Yeah.
You have... Now, I will say, when it was first being explained, it's like, so you roll randomly, you move whatever it tells you, and you have no control over anything.
Right.
Now, thematically, that makes sense, because we're supposed to be lost in the forest, and we're not really sure where we're going.
Yeah.
Gameplay, it's very frustrating, because I know exactly where I want to go.
Yes.
I know how to get there.
And the children are always there.
And I can't move it.
Yeah.
I cannot get there.
Yep. Especially whenever we had an encounter against something randomly, and it's like, oh, let's fight. Okay, well, we chose to fight it, and it, like, teleported us.
Yeah.
And it's like, are you, like... Yeah, theme doesn't always make good game mechanics. I don't mind the direction die. Roll to move in 2022, almost 2023, is so unacceptable.
And then,
like,
the randomness on top of that, because you can't even necessarily choose direction. Now, I will say that there were plenty of ways to mitigate that I was not expecting, and that was a good decision.
Yeah.
It's like there are several different reasons and several different things that we encountered, even in our short game.
Yeah.
That,
Well, I mean, even think about it, like, we picked people who actually had a 1 to 10, like a D10 movement.
Right.
Last time I played, my friend picked the Elder, and I picked the Healer, and it's a D6.
Yeah.
So we're like the oldest fucking people coming through this forest slow as hell, and 1, 1, 1.
3!
And then I'm thinking, and then it's like, well, you have 3 days to try and get the kids. I'm like, oh man, are we up against the clock? Nope.
Yeah.
There's no actual progression of time, except having successful encounters. So it's like, so there's, why have lose conditions? Like,
Again, for young kids
yeah,
who don't have any level of strategy.
right. But then it's also just kind
Which
of
gets
odd.
back to my, it's for graduates of Candyland kind of thing.
I guess. I mean,
Or,
yeah.
or Snakes and Ladders.
It is definitely... It is definitely for kids of that caliber. But then it's also just kind of odd of, theming choices. Like Slavic lore for, the 6-year-old.
Gets even more specific.
Right.
For kids that are interested in history and fantasy.
Yeah.
And parents that are willing to put up with kids that are interested in
Yeah.
history and fantasy.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it's super cool if there are kids who do find this stuff fascinating and they actually learn and go down the Slavic folklore route versus, the just the stereotypical Norse or Greek mythology.
Right.
It's like, oh, do this because this is completely different.
Or even Egyptian, which is done a lot less.
Yeah.
But it's well enough known. It's taught in public schools.
Exactly. Like this or Celtic lore, stuff that's never touched on, I think is super
African.
cool. Yeah. So all that stuff is very neat. So, but it is such a niche market that I think a lot of people are going to play this game. I mean, it says ages 14 up as
14?
well. 14?
Oh, God.
But then they talk about
I think
all their I think so too.
14-year-olds with kids, maybe.
Yeah, maybe they're babysitting and they're breaking this out.
But, so if it's a game that is primarily geared at younger people or lighter people, it's not... I don't think that the price point is going to attract to that, because this is probably not a $30 game.
No, it wasn't super expensive. I think it was $120.
Yeah, but that's not going to be something that a lot of parents are going to go, this sounds like something that's worth trying.
Yeah. I mean, kind of like when you're playing the game, you're rolling the dice and hoping everything works out. But then even then, if it's geared towards very, light family gaming kind of things, I think there's too much fiddliness of like, because parents who are playing this with their kids probably want to be able to follow the rules as well, and it's just like, oh, just throw the tokens on crossroads. Right. Like we did it in a way where it's like, oh, it's the evening. Okay, we don't need to have encounters. We just we got to the children, so get all the monsters out of our way.
Yep.
So we can just get there and win. But then it's like, okay, well, we want to have all the encounters. Cool, then just do that. I like the idea of what they did with the bag.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of what they did with your character, like using
Pockets.
stuff like for pockets, like for companions, and for like upgrades and stuff, and then the stuff, your attributes on the side. I think this works better than this.
Yeah.
I hate the bag.
Yeah.
It's clunky, and the way that you slide them in, I feel like is actually backwards.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it needs to be like
It
this.
covers up the most important part.
It literally does. They wanted, again, to showcase their art and their lore, but then you're constantly having to pull it out and be like, okay, so what can I use this on? Instead of it being a quick glance. Because it's like, oh man, what does my Fire Fest do?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I have to flip. Oh man, that would have been good last time.
Yeah. Which, again, any other game would be cards in your hand, hand limit.
Yeah.
This one has slots, which, again, lends itself to younger people who have a harder time keeping track or have a harder time holding.
Yeah, but I also think it doesn't really help younger people, just because...
Well,
this
the way
thing's-
that they chose to make the cards
I guess.
is a serious hindrance.
Yeah. Because, like, even kids are going to have to, kind of mess with it.
Yep.
And remember... And because, like, I can't actively see something that's right in front of you. Because, like, parents are going to want to look at their, kids' stuff and be like, oh, hey, like, don't forget, what does that do? But because they also can't read, because the kid will have their own bag over here,
Yep.
probably forgetting it. And then the parent can't help them see what the basal does to help a fight against a certain enemy.
Yep. It's a lot to try to remember for each person.
So it's like, so the choosing what you have to do before an encounter is backwards.
Yes.
Roll the move is archaic.
Again, it's thematic, because it kind of makes sense. If they're hidden, you stumble across them, you have to react before you really assess the situation. But it's a thematic choice that doesn't translate into a good gameplay.
Right. The roll the move does not make any sense. The directional die, that's the part I don't have a problem with.
Really?
Yeah, I mean the direction die makes sense.
Okay.
Because if like the lore is like humans, you live in the village but you don't go in the woods.
Well, yeah.
And you end up having to, you go there and you come across a path and you're like, it'd be better if you had an inherent movement and then every crossroads you rolled the directional die.
Right.
And it's like, okay, now you have to go left.
Right.
Versus...
Or some of the time, there's a confusion fog over some of them.
Yeah. But just the fact that you have to roll and you can one. It's almost like, you know what, let's not even bother, let's just group up.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm rolling 10s all over the place, having all the encounters, and you're not. So why is it's not fun for you?
And why would we split up? We'll just have more encounters, but we're going the same place.
Yeah.
And it didn't occur to me before, but it occurred to me when it's like, all that means is that we get to use all of our powers all the time instead of splitting up.
Again, it's almost like they kind of wanted to, they clearly had an audience in mind, but then was like, oh, well, we're not going to sell it. We're not going to make our funding goal if we don't try and make it for everyone. So, yeah, you can lose if these very hard and specific things happen.
Yeah. We didn't even... All of our encounters were successful. We had a few things, and of course, we're game players, so we got enough of the strategy, but it implies that there's almost no way to lose any of the encounters.
Yeah. Well, also at the same time...
Which means that you're just going to run out of time faster.
Pretty much.
Because it only tracks successfuls.
Yeah. I mean, the last time I played this, I did fail a lot of encounters, but that's because we were actively just wanting to do different stuff.
Yeah.
Like, when we were playing, it was just kind of like, I want to hide. And then we flip it, and it's like, oh, number one, oh, well, failed. Just because it's like, well, in this case, my hide is 9, and it was a 1, so it's like, that's the Wraith, and hiding is a 9. And so it's like, and in that case, it's almost always roll a d6, odd you succeed, even you, or odd you fail, even you succeed. But we failed all the time. And then I had to keep going through the rules, and I'm like, okay, so no, you have unlimited daytime until you have 7 successful encounters.
Yeah.
And then evening is just rinse and repeat. Nighttime's the only time it gets
Which actually implies that you might want to fail constantly, find the kids, and then fail all the way back. I'm sure there's some negative consequences.
There's a bunch of negative stuff, yeah. Like, one of them was, like, one of the... It was like some skeleton that's, like, born from its horse.
Okay.
These things are, like... The lore is like, yeah, you don't want to fight those. Like, they're... And, like, he fought it and failed, and it was one of those where it's like... Yeah, you're basically bleeding out, and then, like, a bunch of fairies carried him to the fairy place and healed him.
Mm-hmm. Which then, how do you get out of?
We just had him walk out.
Yep.
Because there was nothing in there. It was like, oh, wait, you actually take me to that spot? Okay, how do I leave? There was another thing that is actually incredibly annoying. Like, I really, really think it was a massive misstep. Is they reference a bunch of stuff that's on the map. Mm-hmm. And there is a map in the rulebook where it's like the locations. Yeah. So, like, one example, whenever it was like in our run through, when it said, hey, you go back to the cave.
Right.
Well, I had known where the cave was just by playing this game previously, but the first time I ever played this, it was like, which one's number 10 on the... It's like, why don't they just have an actual map? Like, instead of having to go through the rulebook, like, you have this thing, you know, for the time counter, have one of that size for the map so you can just pick it up instead of having to filter through the rulebook. Yep. To be like, oh, okay, that's where the cave is. So it's like some things are just completely omitted. Probably from trying to make sure all their lore is correct, they forgot to make a game. Like I said, this game is not for me. Right. I knew it wasn't for me after playing it the first time.
Reading the rules.
And reading the rules and actually watching the review. Mm-hmm. Like, which, once again, is something I never do. But it
Did you just want to see if you were missing something?
No, so I'd watched the review before I even read the rules or anything, and I was just like, okay, well, I kind of want to know how to play. And so I watched...
you thought it might be more involved?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be like more of either a campaign or like my other storytelling games that I have.
Yeah.
Whenever he was
Sleeping
talking...
God, yeah.
Something like that.
That's a lot.
With Slavic lore.
To take in.
So I was sitting there watching the review, and I was like, oh no. It has rolled a move. That's already a bad sign. And even he mentioned, like, yeah, there are rules to lose. You're most likely not gonna. Mm-hmm. Like, you almost have to go out of your way to lose. And I get it. In multiplayer games, someone does play the children.
Yeah.
Trying to also get back.
Oh, and they move themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I
actually find that worse. Like, if someone was playing the children.
Because then they're moving semi-randomly.
Exactly. And they're having encounters as well. Mm-hmm. It would just be more annoying because it's like, well, I need to get to you, and I know you're not actively trying to get out of my way, but the game randomly is just pulling you away from me. Which, again, is thematic, but it's like, I'd rather them just be in a very specific spot and you just go there.
Yeah.
But, at least for me, the Slavic lore is not enough for me. It got me interested in the lore,
sure,
but not through this. Not through this kind of medium.
Yeah. It's kind of like, it occurs to me now, it's kind of like, the classic example in my mind is Disney doing fairy tales. Mm-hmm. Like, they looked at the fairy tales and they went, no. No. There's a lot here we can use.
Yeah.
There's some things we absolutely have to change to market it to who
to
we
kids.
Want to entertain.
Exactly. Like, oh my god, Hercules kills his wife and kids?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, no, they live happily ever after. Exactly.
All of the fairy tales.
Pretty much every single
one. Snow White, Little Mermaid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're all...
Any of the Grimms.
Any of the Grimm's fairy tales are always super dark, and Disney's like, but what if they weren't?
Yeah. Hunchback.
Yep.
Most kids would not recognize that The Hunchback is a horror story, as well as a romance.
Well, actually, yeah, that's actually a sleeper, because they make Frollo, like, I'm like, oh man, he's a horrifying villain. Yeah, this game has a lot going on. I don't know who it's for. I commend them for the lore.
Mm-hmm. I would say off the top of my head, my best bet is to market it heavily in Eastern Europe, where people are more familiar with the folklore and would be much more interested and involved.
There's Radgost.
See, amazing.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I think that's Radgost anyway. I don't know. But yeah, they got some really cool... the minis are really nice. I actually kind of think the minis are a hindrance.
Oh yeah, definitely. Mechanically.
Yeah.
They don't fit anywhere you're supposed to put them.
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4 of them get clustered onto one spot.
Yep. Yeah. There are standees that are actually numbered on the back.
Okay.
And actually better because it's super bright and colorful art.
Oh yeah.
Like this one, like that's the Taliesin from the number 11, so that would just be right there. But it's also actually kind of annoying, and I get why they did it, is because they're numbered on the back, but like only one person at any given time is going to get to see it because it's not double-sided.
Well, I don't know, because the rule book and everything sort of implies that everybody's on one side of the board. And the cooperative nature probably should be... Well, because they talk about right and left.
Yeah.
Like, who's right and left?
It's supposed to be like kind of as your character is moving.
Yeah.
So like, can you hear me? Just one of my characters. Like, if I was heading this way, I would keep like I wouldn't be like, oh, he's walking backwards.
Right.
So like, whenever he's physically moving and hits here, this is the left and this is the right.
That makes sense.
Whenever he's coming this way, this is the left and this is the right. I think it actually kind of works. It'd be nice if they had put on the minis or something like a little arrow. Or something so it's like, oh, hey, when you move them, make sure the arrow is going the way you're facing.
Right.
I mean, granted, it should just be obvious, because that's how you would walk down a path.
And the only strike against that theory is their starting point. They say you can't go to the one on the left. But from our perspective, that would be the one on the right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is how I played it the very first time. I was like, okay, I guess we can't go down that. Yeah, I guess we can't go down there, but then that doesn't make any sense.
Right. In fact, what is this for anyway? Maybe they're adding on expansion boards.
They do have scenarios you can play. Mm-hmm. Like in the rulebook, it does kind of. Let's see.
Is one of them abandon the children?
So they have 3 scenarios, mini expansions. So the Return to the Forest of Radgost. They have
Revenge of the Forest of Radgost.
The Unfinished Destinies, the Key of Life, and the Witch's Secret Ties. And they have like different tasks and stuff you can do. So this is probably their Kickstarter exclusive, like stretch goal edition. Mm-hmm. Oh, for gamers, you know. Mm-hmm. Hey, actually, now you try and do all these different tasks instead of just go find the kids. They have
for half a second when you said that, I was actually interested, and maybe those would actually work better as a game.
They probably would, yeah.
But the half a second passed, and I went, I'm not interested in finding out.
Exactly. That's really where I'm at. They have these overlay tiles that are supposed to kind of change up the board, and they're warping just because they're made of shit material. And then they also have personalized quests per character, like something that you're supposed to do that Zrek, the sorcerer, gives you. It's like, hey, by the way, while you're out there, can you get us like a bunch of herbs so I can do my drugs? It's like, Zrek, are you okay? No, those kids they're always lost.
Find the mushroom fields.
Yeah. So there is some extra stuff in here. They also have included a storytelling, like a RPG kind of thing, like story starter dice set, which which are these right here.
Okay.
So like, yeah, after you have some experience playing the Forest of Radgost, you will progress to personal missions and eventually to additional missions. The story starter dice are an aid to this kind of experienced player. It is a set of dice contained a variety of symbols to serve as storytelling prompts. So it's kind of like a very light RPG.
Right.
You can use like this lore and these to kind of be like, oh, here's the starting location and here's some events that happen. Again, just not the scenarios; those seem pretty fleshed out, but those dice seem like kind of a stretch.
Yeah, pasted on.
Yeah, a little bit.
It's like...
I mean, another positive to the game is there are a lot of cards.
Yes.
Like if you don't mind constantly being involved in cards, which I don't. I think that keeps it fresh. Like,
yeah, replayable.
Yeah,
random.
There's a lot of forest cards. This is gonna be the deck you're pulling from the most.
Yeah.
we only in the last game I played, we didn't even touch the orange deck.
Yeah.
So that was really cool.
And there are 3 decks we didn't touch this time.
Yep, didn't touch the blue. In the first game I played, we were in this brown deck quite a bit.
Okay.
One of the actual encounters we had was with these kind of like hybrid humanoid wolf gnoll kind of monsters,
Okay.
and they had captured the elder. But based off the way it was going, he actually was able to convince the elder, or he was able to convince them where the children were, and you had multiple opportunities to try and trick them. And they're like, I guess those monsters are very afraid of water, so he was able to lure them within 4 spaces of a water crossroads, which he then, since they were afraid of water, he escaped.
Okay.
So they do have a lot of cool storytelling elements and multiple ways to interact. The problem is you have to be okay with failing.
Yeah.
And if you've played Tales of Arabian Nights, I think that game just does encounters better. Tales of Arabian Nights is not a game.
It doesn't have any of the mechanical problems. This
Yeah.
one does. It's
It's purely sit around and read.
right.
And
guess.
yeah, and have a good time because it's just chaos.
Yeah.
This is crafted better. Like overall, like this is a lot more concise and is a tighter fit game, but it's not as fun interactive.
Right. It's trying to walk the line, and it's kind of failing at both of them.
Yeah. Have their cake and eat it too. Because everyone who plays Tales of Arabian Nights knows to not take it seriously.
Yeah.
Here it's like, well, you want to respect them because they spent so much time.
Oh yeah.
But it's like, well, I don't think anyone's playing this and is like laughing out loud because, we killed a dragon that's actually supposed to be, guarding a village.
Unless you grew up with these stories and you're very familiar with these characters.
Yeah. Yeah, so definitely not a game for me. And who it is for is probably a small group.
Yeah. Wish them well.
Yeah. All right. On a scale of 1 to 10, what would you give the Forest of Radgost?
I don't know if I can. This is again one of those absolute split between rating it as a game or rating it as an experience.
Yeah.
The theme, the art, the production quality, because those are all excellent. Those are all, I'm thinking 9-10. The gameplay, 3.
Yeah.
It wasn't awful, and it certainly didn't last as long. It didn't drag on as long as I thought it was going to.
Yes.
Well, again, that was luck. I mean, we got one thing that set us way back, and then we had one thing that set us way forward.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
that wasn't. Neither of those were particularly fun.
Yeah, exactly. I've had multiple experiences of just teleport after just hindrance. But at the end of the day, it was never that big of a deal because it's not like we're on like a round track. Oh, me, you, that's day, that's hour 1.
Yeah.
So it's like this is arbitrary.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, oh man, we teleported. Okay, well let's just keep having encounters. But unfortunately, they also didn't put in the time to do a foreteller audio narration app. Like, I think that would have been way immersive if you actually had an encounter app that, thematically read it to you and had ambiance. It's like, oh man, that'd be so cool.
Yeah.
You'd have correct pronunciations to really, dive into this kind of atmosphere that they want. But instead, it's typically the strongest reader or the person who owns the game who is reading a lot. Mm-hmm. And I don't mind reading, but man,
another possibility for an app that occurred to me is instead of having the randomness in dice rolling, in an app, it could be a random layout, and they could actually have things change and be a more magical forest.
That'd be cool. Like,
I don't know if it would play well or better, but I think it would be a cool app.
Yeah. I don't know how well. I can't remember how well this game did on Kickstarter, but
Well,
I think
it made its goal.
with high storytelling and narrative games, with foreteller existing, and it's like that's the only way I can play certain games now. It's like I can't read this anymore. I definitely don't want to listen to someone read, so I'll just read. But I don't want to read.
Yeah.
So
If it's going to be somebody, they should have an interesting voice. They should be a professional actor.
Yeah, I mean, again, the best example I can give is for anyone to just listen to the sample audio of Gloomhaven in Foreteller and be like, oh, so this is how board gaming narration can be done.
Yeah.
And that would have been awesome here, because...
Yeah, that would...
Because then you just click on... Oh, I mean, they wouldn't even... Like, this isn't like the thickest book of encounters.
No.
So it's like, oh, okay, I find number 10, and then pick the outcome. And then it reads the outcome. It's like, okay, cool. And then you just have a soundtrack or something. I get what you're saying on ranking, just because, as an experience, it's higher than gameplay. I actively dislike the gameplay quite a bit. Like, I shouldn't have to be like, I don't want to read another white card. You know? I moved one space. I don't want to keep reading another fucking card.
Yeah.
So I'm going to split the difference and just put it out of 5.
My average would be probably 6 then.
6.
Between the two.
Slightly above average, yeah. The gameplay, for me, worked against the interests of the lore, unfortunately, because I think the Slavic lore is super cool, and I am excited to get into that, but then I'm immediately jerked out of the book and then back to...
Yeah. It's a game that makes you want to learn more about the legends and the myths.
Yeah. Which I guess if that was their goal, then they succeeded, but I'll just do it on my own time. I'll just literally go get a book on Slavic mythology, like I have on Norse and Greek.
Sure. And
those will sit on my shelf, because I haven't read those either. So, you got anything else?
I can't think of anything.
All right. Beautiful. So that's the Forest of Radgost, everyone. Let us know what you think of the game in the comments below. Other than that, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you. Hey everyone, thank you for watching, and I really hope that you enjoyed the video. If you would like to see more of my content, go ahead and click that subscribe button and the bell to be notified whenever I upload any new content. If you feel like supporting the channel, you can go ahead and click that Patreon link to be taken to my Patreon, and any help is truly appreciated. Other than that, stick around for any other run-throughs or reviews or cool top 10s or whatever I feel like putting on. Other than that, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you.